You know, I was thinking as I was sitting there that when I'd give talks at meetings, I'd usually come with, I don't know, 20 slides, and I'd get through about 3. So I'm going to try very hard to stick to script, though I may go off script now and again. As many of you know, I'm a recovering Catholic, and I've been in search of a vision of faith that I could embrace for a long time. Science has been my passion for most of my life, and I look to it to guide my journey away from Catholicism. Now, I don't mean to pick on the Catholics, because the 3 major religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, some would argue less so for Judaism, are top-down religions, patriarchal hierarchies that take their information, that take their version of faith from the top. Most share the belief that we humans were put here by God to either save the planet or exploit it. In fact, there's a popular argument among many that God put the Earth just the right distance from the sun, so-called Goldilocks zone, and gave the constants like the charge in the electron and Planck's constant just the right values so that we humans could thrive. God put the Earth here just for us. How special we are. I'll have more to say about this later, but for now, suffice it to say that even at that early age, a top-down universe with God as the king and us humans only slightly less important than angels made no sense to me. It wasn't until I went to college that I stopped going to church, intimidated as I was with the threat of losing my immortal soul. It was there that I began the quest to find an alternative faith through a lot of twists and turns. As I said, the path I chose was to study science, chemistry to be specific, and see where a belief in science would lead me. After all, there's much to be said for believing in science because we can explain a hell of a lot. And much of it turned the beliefs of the religious beliefs of the time on their head. From Copernicus and Galileo's reimagining of the heavens, to Newton's brilliant falling apple insight that led to the laws of motion, the grip of the God-controlled, human-centric universe was giving way to a faith where it could all be explained with cold, hard facts. The next 3 centuries led to a conceit that heralded the death of God, since all that we used to explain by a belief in God's miracles was now merely the work of an unsympathetic set of rules of nature, and we were all the products of a clockwork universe. There was no free will, only the push-pull of forces like gravity and electromagnetism that compelled our every action. You didn't decide to go to the store. The forces of nature pushed your molecules to the store. We had, in the words of the cosmologist Michelle Fowler, pushed God out farther and farther as we discovered that we could explain more and more with science. If it wasn't a miracle that decided the flight of a cannonball or the source of a lightning bolt, maybe God's miracle was more grandiose. Maybe the Big Bang. Or maybe we didn't need God at all. That's where we were at the turn of the 20th century. Of course, the clockwork version of our existence has been pretty much discredited with the science of the 20th century, featuring a new version of reality with uncertainty as its hallmark. If it's not possible to know exactly where something is and at the same time exactly how fast it's moving, and it isn't, and if a particle exists as a diffuse wave until someone or something looks at it, and if it's possible to entangle 2 particles so that each responds instantly when the other is observed, no matter how far apart they are, maybe life isn't so clockwork after all. which already puts me way outside the camp of materialism, because the world of quantum mechanics, which is by far the best theory of reality that we have, is just too weird. Now, what I mean by it's the best theory we have is its predictions are always right. That's why we have computers. That's why we have lasers. That's why we have GPS. And you may know that, thank you, Einstein, we have to correct the GPS signal that we get from the satellites, because the satellites' clocks are running faster than our clocks because they're farther away from the Earth, which is one of those things that started to turn science on its head at the beginning of the 20th century when Einstein figured that out. And of course, we now have atomic clocks which prove it. Now, don't get me wrong. Jumped ahead. There will always be mystery, and invariably, just when we think we have it all figured out, along will come another Einstein, and we'll be back where we started. Now, don't get me wrong, science does progress. As I said before, quantum mechanics is the best description of reality we have ever had. And all those crazy things, the entangled particles, the wavicles instead of particles, it's all true. We've done the experiments. That stuff is all true. But the reality we experience apparently isn't the whole story. When scientists applied the laws of gravity to the shape and motion of galaxies, there wasn't nearly enough observable mass to explain why, for example, the Milky Way is a spiral, and more to the point, why the outer bands are moving so fast. According to our physics, if they're moving that fast, they shouldn't be in a spiral. We should be heading out off into deep space. And yet we're not. Well, how do we explain it? Dark mass. Dark mass is stuff we have no way of experiencing. None of our detectors can pick it up, mostly because we pick up things using light. You may know that the JRST, the James Webb Space Telescope, is using infrared light. And the reason for that is that the galaxies that they want to look at, they're seeing light from them that's about 14.5 billion years old. And the universe is expanding. And as the universe expands, the light that was coming through as ultraviolet and X-rays is expanded in wavelength. So now that light is in the infrared. That's why the JRST is measuring infrared radiation. And you may have seen some of the spectacular images that they have shown us. But the point is, you can't explain with our understanding of gravity why our Milky Way is a spiral with the outer bands moving so fast unless 86% of it is dark matter. 86% of the mass of the universe is thought to be dark matter. And if that weren't bad enough, you may know that the Hubble telescope is named after Edwin Hubble, who proved to us that our universe is expanding. Einstein didn't want to believe it. He was sure the universe was static. In fact, he was so sure, I'm going off topic now. He was so sure that to his general relativity, he added a constant at the end of it because general relativity predicted that the universe would expand. But he added the so-called cosmological constant so it wouldn't. And he said later that was the greatest mistake he'd ever made in his life. But so the universe is expanding. And so there were two schools of thought. If there's enough mass in the universe, it'll continue to expand because of the explosion we now call the Big Bang until it reaches a certain point, and then gravity will take over and the universe will start contracting. They called it the Big Crunch. Now, if that's true, by the way, we don't know what happens to entropy. I mean, entropy is all based on an expanding universe. If the universe contracts, So that's one version. The second version is there isn't enough mass, and the universe will just expand forever with nothing to stop it. That was actually called the heat death. Well, what did we find out? Not only is the universe expanding, the expansion is accelerating. It's expanding faster every second. How can that be? Why? Dark energy. We don't know what that is either, but it's the only explanation for why the universe is expanding. The expansion of the universe is increasing in rate. That's the only thing we could come up with. So, while we have theories, and believe me, quantum theory and the so-called standard model in physics explain just about everything we observe. But we only observe 5% of the universe. 95% of it is either dark matter or dark energy. Who are we kidding? No matter how knowledgeable we become, we'll never find the Rosetta Stone that completely explains our universe. And that's because we're just not that smart. Another favorite physicist of mine, Jim Khalili, talks about our knowledge being an island. And right at the shore is where we're working on the big picture questions of the day. And so we add a little sand over time to the shore as we understand more and more. But the question is, how big is the ocean? But dark stuff and wavy particles, which Richard Feynman, who was the physicist between Einstein and Stephen Hawking, used to call the particles wavicles, because they literally are wavicles. But if we go past the dark stuff and the wavy particles, there's one thing modern science has convinced, in my humble opinion, has established beyond a reasonable doubt, beyond any doubt. Whether we credit Darwin or Watson and Crick, we are now sure we are the descendants of all that has lived before us. Darwin's insights about how evolution works were given an emphatic vote of confidence when Watson and Crick realized, based on X-ray work done by Rosalind Franklin, who should have gotten the Nobel Prize along with them, how DNA was put together, and finally, how it works. And more to the point, that ours is the same as our DNA is the same as every other living being, consisting of adenine, cytosine, guanine, and thymine, those four nucleic acids, in every living thing. And they all play by the same rules. They all play by the same rules. We now know that DNA begets RNA, which carries the code that builds proteins that build us. And it makes us one in an unbroken line of species that has evolved from whatever process produced life in the first place. I am so hopeful we'll find definite signs of life on another world, even methane-breathing fish, which is another image that Michelle Thaler put in my head. I'm less confident that we'll find intelligent life, at least by our standards. But there's good evidence that 3.5 billion years ago, life appeared on Earth. That's only 700,000 years after the Earth was formed. So essentially, as soon as life could exist on Earth, it did. So it would be amazing to me if we didn't find at least one-celled life on other planets, possibly Europa. That's where they're going next. But whether life exists elsewhere or not, science tells me that far from being placed here, we grew here in the environment that spawned us. That's why all the constants work. We're the product of that's why all the constants work, because we grew up under their influence. We came from the Earth. We weren't put on the Earth. That, for me, is a huge distinction. And what all this suggests to me is that all life is special. sacred even, and each of us is an actor playing one of the infinite roles the universe creates to express itself. I remember vividly listening to Alan Watts as I worked Sunday mornings at Store 24 in Harvard Square, and I was particularly struck when he said that Jesus never said, "I am the Son of God." He said, "I am a Son of God. And so are you, and so are you, and so are you." That's why he was so scary to the establishment. He said, "I am a Son of God." And given what science has taught me, that must mean that all life is a manifestation of God. What's more, in the immortal words of Joni Mitchell, we are stardust, we are golden, we are billion-year-old carbon. Literally. I don't know, I mean, she must have studied physics, Joni, because literally, let me get this, I want to make sure I say this right. Right, sorry. The atoms in our bodies and all around us were made in exploding stars that probably started billions of years ago. So if you think about it, every atom in your body except hydrogen, and if you were at a party and inhaled some helium, every atom in your body was made in a star that exploded and then re-exploded. Another star may have exploded, and those atoms traveled through billions of years and countless miles to end up in my body and in yours. Everything we are was made in a star. So I've come to believe two things. God is not dead, just unknowable, the mystery. And because of our curiosity, we'll continue to try and understand the mystery, adding grains of sand to the shoreline, which is great as long as we don't get too full of ourselves. The ocean is a very big place. And two, instead of pushing God out, we need to welcome the mystery in and let its different manifestations continue to marvel us and give us joy as well as pain. To see the divine not on some throne way up in the sky, but in all that we interact with right here on earth, is to abolish the hierarchy and the conceit and to name this life for what it is, a miracle. That's a faith I can embrace. Namaste, blessed be, amen.